Welcome to the Agent of Wealth podcast with Marc Bautis from Bautis Financial. In this podcast, Marc helps guide you towards financial freedom, ensure you never run out of money, and create a balance in life that prioritizes what is most important to you. Join us for this journey as Marc draws from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the multiple wealth building challenges involved in your financial life.
Welcome back to the Agent of Wealth. This is your host, Marc Bautis. Today I'm joined by a special guest, Marques Colston. Many of you know Marques from his incredible NFL career with the New Orleans Saints, but his journey did not stop there. Marques is now founding partner at Champion Venture Partners, where he's creating innovative investment strategies and driving impactful change in underserved communities. In this episode, we'll dive into Marques' fascinating transition from sports to business, explore his approach to strategic diversification, and hear his insights on leadership and building high-performance cultures. Marques, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you having me on.
So let's start with your transition from the NFL to the business world. What motivated you to move into venture capital after your football career ended?
So interestingly enough, venture capital wasn't really a place that I had my eye on. I didn't even know it existed before I got to the NFL. So early in my career, it was a space where I saw a lot of my colleagues starting to kind of get engaged in really at that intersection of sports and business, sports tech. So that was kind of the initial traction for me. And once I got into the ecosystem, I kind of started to move around a little bit, made my first couple of investments. I started to see how VC, kind of allowed me to leverage some of the qualities that I had built over my sports career and really making that connection between my journey as an athlete and really the process of becoming a professional athlete, how that mirrored a lot of the early stage entrepreneurs that I was interacting with. Once I was able to kind of make that connection, I started to kind of see how I could move and how I could fit into the space. And that was when I started to get comfortable and kind of started to spread my wings a little bit.
Were some of those early investments that you did, were you hands-on in some of those companies, or was it more of you were kind of like a passive investor in them?
No, I've never been a passive investor. And I think a lot of that is a function of not really knowing. I didn't have a lot of institutional knowledge, coming in. So I wasn't somebody that was really confident in my investment insights early on. So for me, being able to roll my sleeves up, get involved in the companies I invested in, try to stay engaged in companies that in industries that I understood, that was also a way for me to kind of de-risk my capital, but also, kind of get some boots on the ground learning experiences just because I knew I was coming into the game late, being a player and, a lot of the entrepreneurs and the investors, they kind of come of age in the industry versus, me being a player. I was just kind of stepping in and I was green in a lot of ways. So it was really kind of a double-edged sword for me to de-risk my capital, but then also continue to learn and figure out how I could actually, operate within the space.
Yeah, you were like you said, you were probably green coming in, but also your experience as a professional athlete probably helped you in some aspect. How did being a professional athlete prepare you for entrepreneurship and investing in companies?
I would say for me, like I said before, making a connection between my journey to professional sports and the entrepreneurs that were launching companies, that connection was huge because I could see the journey. I could understand the perspective. And then obviously, the soft skills that everyone talks about that translate from sports into business, to leadership, insights. For me, it's really the whole athlete development process and the self-awareness that comes with, not just becoming an athlete, but remaining a good athlete over a course of time and building a body of work. A lot of those insights and a lot of those strategies, I was able to kind of see them in the process of becoming a great athlete and, be able to transfer them into entrepreneurship once I was able to map the skills. It just took a while, a handful of engagements. It took, some doors getting slammed in my face, some no's here and there. But once I was able to kind of get deep enough to see that connection, for me, it was comforting in that I kind of knew the journey. I just had to learn it in a new context.
Did you have a mentor as you were going through it, or did you kind of figure everything out by yourself?
I started out with a couple advisors that were really influential in, just kind of giving me the push in the back to get out and do some new things. So they were super impactful for me early on. And then, once I got started, just being a self-starter, again, just kind of leaning into that process of becoming a professional athlete. There's not really a pathway in front of you. You're kind of building it each step as you go. So that was the same approach that I took getting involved in each one of these ventures, just rolling my sleeves up, learning, exhibiting enough humility to know that I don't have the answers, and, being humble enough to ask. Sometimes people sometimes people you don't know. And after a while, after enough reps, you figure out who you can ask the right questions to kind of keep the journey moving forward.
And how did you go from that to saying, okay, it's a good idea, let's start a actual, venture capital firm and kind of make this a bigger scale operation?
Yeah, it took a while. So for me, I did my first investment. This had to be in 2010. Right. So I'm 15 years deep at this point. And when we started Champion Venture Partners, for me, it was really important not just to have the investment experience, but to have the entrepreneurial experience, kind of build a lot of the different skill sets that comes along with actually managing and running a firm. So it took me a good 14, 15 years to get to a place where I felt comfortable enough standing in front of an organization that, has this type of scalability and has this type of upside to it.
Can you go into a little bit of detail on how Champion Venture Partners is structured, and what types of companies or things do you invest in, and do investors come into the firm, or using your own capital, and how it's structured?
The entire firm is structured as a holding company structure, right? So we're more of a permanent capital structure than a typical VC firm. And that was important to us for a lot of different reasons. Diversification is one huge reason, but also, we wanted to make sure that we were able to create accessibility for folks to invest in alternative assets that typically get left out of the conversation, right? So being somebody that my typical path, if I had not been fortunate enough to play in the NFL, I would have been one of those investors that was left completely out of the venture capital and private equity conversation. Right. So kind of coming from that background and having that perspective, it was really important to structure CVP in a way that, yes, we can tap into the upside that exists in sports and kind of the sports asset class. But we also wanted to do it in a way that, just the same 1% investor that gets into all of the, the team deals and the, the super high level deals. We wanted to make sure that we can create access so that a different and more diverse investor pool can get access. So like I mentioned, we are a holding company structure, and one of the vehicles that we're launching is called an interval fund. And that's the vehicle that will invest it across the sports asset class. We'll be in sports tech, we'll be in sports medicine, we'll be into some teams and leagues, different assets, across the class. That'll be the vehicle that's accessible for both retail and accredited and institutional investors. It's not a typical 2 and 20 model, but we built it that way on purpose so that we can make sure that we can get this opportunity in front of a more diverse investor pool.
And you mentioned, I guess, diversification being important. How do you go about, I guess, evaluating, okay, this is a company or an industry or an area or sector that we're interested in, and how does it make it up into the fund?
So typically when you think about sports investing, most of the conversation is dominated by investments into what I call the big 5 leagues, right? The NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, MLS. But when you start to really dig into the sports asset class as a whole, what you start to see is there are different verticals that kind of are the picks and shovels of the sports industry, right? So there's some service businesses in there. There are some fan engagement and ticketing platforms in there. There are a lot of media companies in there. There's hospitality, real estate. So everything that kind of exists on the fringe of sports is part of how we want to diversify this as an investment fund and an investment vehicle. So just being in all of the different verticals within sports gives us a lot of diversity across types of businesses, across, duration and all of the things that you want in a diverse portfolio. the fact that we're looking at the breadth of the sports asset class gives us some baked in diversity. But the other thing that we also do is we kind of actively look for those 1+1=3 opportunities, right? So we want to make sure that, if we're investing in this ticketing platform or this fan engagement platform, and we have this soccer team that we've invested in, we want to be able to bring those two portfolio companies together so that, that integration kind of creates a risk mitigation strategy in its own right, because you're kind of introducing two platforms to each other, and all of the stakeholders get a chance to benefit from that interaction and that collaboration. So we're very intentional about, one, the sports asset class and making sure that we hit the full spectrum of it, but two, making sure that we form those integrations and form those collaborations within the portfolio so that we're continuing to de-risk even post investment.
It is the fund or the company, is the goal to just like you actively got involved in a lot of companies you initially invested in, is the goal for the fund or for the venture capital firm to actually get involved in helping or running, not only running, but getting involved with providing guidance, being a mentor for some of these companies?
Absolutely. There's nothing about our platform as a passive investment.
Yeah.
So part of the thesis baked in is we have an in-house management company and consulting firm that, in essence, they're our value add strategy, right? So we want to invest into a company. We want our capital to always be strategic, but we want to be able to deploy that management company who's, it's made up of a team of experts that have been in and around sports for decades collectively. And the purpose of that management company is to get into our portfolio companies and figure out what they need. How can we help them scale, right? Because when you look at a lot of these companies, when they're raising their Series A, maybe their Series B, a lot of that spend from that raise is going to be right back out the door to go find talented individuals. So our management company steps in, and we can step into fractional C-suite roles. We can step into business development roles. We can step into sales and marketing roles. And really what that allows us to do is, one, we're always coming in the door as strategic capital to where our portfolio companies are really true partnerships. Two, it helps us de-risk the investment even post investment. And three, it allows those companies to grow in kind of a more insulated fashion. And the insights that we get across our portfolio with our management company working within everyone, they get access to those shared insights, right? So everything about what we do is kind of ecosystem driven. One move kind of sets up the next move. We intentionally built the platform in that way because we're all operators at heart. We're not hanging our hat saying, hey, we're not Wall Street investors. We are business operators that know sports. We know the intersection of business and sports. And our value add is helping the companies that we invest in, grow and scale to reach their vision, because they reach their vision, we all win as stakeholders.
I guess it's kind of segueing into like the importance of leadership and culture in some of these companies that you're investing in, which will drive the success of them. Leadership is important in sports, important in business. How would you describe your leadership style?
It's funny because being an athlete, your leadership starts with self, right? You're constantly honing your self-leadership to not just become a great player, but kind of remain there. My goal, I've been focused on self-leadership for so long that leadership, like from a business standpoint and from an organizational standpoint, is something that I'm really just over the last couple of years have started to hone in on. And I lean a lot on my experience as a player and again, that process of becoming a good player. And now some of these insights that I've gained just leading some of the companies that I've been involved with, ultimately I try to lead through, empowering teams with clear values, a shared vision, and accountability. Those are three things that I learned, wholly from sports. And all of the good organizations that I've been a part of, all the good teams that I've been a part of, those three factors have really they've always kind of been there and been present. And ultimately, my goal as a leader is to create a culture that has its own internal standard of excellence. And my goal is really to help people, then help the people that I serve really unlock their full potential kind of in service of this larger organizational vision. that's adopted solely from, 25 years of playing football and seeing what it takes to be a good team. That team that's constantly in the hunt, year after year versus that flash in the pan organization that, you might make the playoffs in year one and you don't sniff it again for another 10. Those are a lot of the anchors that I've kind of learned through sports that I've started to integrate into my leadership style as a business owner.
Yeah. I found like sports, and the other one I guess where you'll find a lot of great leadership qualities is the military as well.
Yep.
Are you finding that a lot of the companies that you're starting to work with or invest in are founded or have a lot of people with like an athletic or sports background?
Surprisingly, it's a mixed bag. That's actually one of the things that have kind of surprised me from day one. There's so many founders and so many entrepreneurs that come from different walks of life, whether it's technology or whether it's, they were attorneys. So there is a really diverse group of I'll just call it origin stories that we work with. But to your point, we tend to gravitate towards the entrepreneurs that kind of have that competitive spirit that you see in sports, that are constantly striving to kind of meet their own internal standard versus just kind of getting to the place where they're supposed to be. They're always looking to exceed. Ultimately, they're always looking to learn and they're coachable. That becomes, with our model, with our value add model, we need entrepreneurs that are humble and that are willing to collaborate and willing to work with folks that might be in positions to help. If you check those boxes, then you're going to be a founder in an organization that we'll take a good hard look at. But if you don't have those qualities, it's going to be hard for us to implement our model, no matter how good the P&L or the pro forma may look.
Just kind of expanded on one of the things of leadership that you talked about. I think a lot of people, they think leadership and they think it's coming from just the person in the top of whether it's an organization, a team, or whatever. But can you expand a little bit about how you talked? One of the first things is that self-leadership and kind of how everyone is a leader in an organization.
Yeah, I mean, that is sports 101. Like, I always think back to my experience, especially as a young player, right? You kind of come into the locker room with these expectations of what it's going to be. But ultimately, what you find is that there's kind of levels to the leadership. It starts with self-leadership, and like, if you're somebody that is willing to show up and do the hard work and enjoy doing the hard work because you enjoy the process, you're going to fit into a culture, right? So once you check the self-leadership box, then it becomes about, I figured out the way to lead myself to become a better version of me. How can I integrate with my teammates and make sure that I'm getting the best out of my teammates next? Once you start to kind of look around your colleagues and your teammates and figure out ways to motivate each other, figure out ways to hold each other accountable. Again, you're adding a building block to that organizational culture. And then the third level is every organization kind of has its high level goals and objectives, right? No different in sports. We're putting together a game plan, like for an opponent. We know exactly what it is that we want to get accomplished for that week, but we've got to be able to take our strengths and we've got to be able to take our skill sets and leverage them against the opponent to build the plan for that week, right? So that third level is really about the organization from the top down being able to clearly articulate the big vision, but then being able to go to each individual, contributor or each individual player on that team and making sure that they understand their role with clarity and how it ties into the organizational goals. When you have those three levels working together, you have, people that are self-led. They're always looking to add value and get the most out of their teammates. And they understand not just the highest level goals of the organization, but how they plug into that. If you can build a leadership structure that has all three of those levels, now you have something that's sustainable. You have a culture that starts to police itself. And that's when your organization is going to be set up for not just success, but for sustainable success.
Yeah, I guess when you look at it, kind of, an NFL team is very similar to a company in the sense that there is a high-level leader, but then within the different organizations, the different departments, there's their own little structures involved there, and everything has to kind of roll down, but also roll back up so that everyone is on the same page with, like you said, achieving that goal or achieving that mission.
1,000%.
One of the things you mentioned is that the work you're trying to do is also working in underserved communities. Can you share some of the initiatives in this area that you're most passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start with, underserved doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in every industry, right? And I kind of spoke to this earlier. A lot of investing, particularly private investing and alternative investing, is about access. And the more time that I spend in this industry and the more time that I study this industry, like what you realize is that every one of the top 1%ers isn't necessarily a great investor. What you start to realize is their success is directly correlated to the quality of the deals that they have access to. That has been one of the things that has been really important for me as an individual, which has kind of bled into our thesis and our mission around Champion Venture Partners, which is to create those access points that really haven't been in existence before. Making alternatives accessible is kind of one thing that's at the bottom of the funnel, but leading with education at the very top of the funnel so that folks can, start to envision themselves as investors. Folks can start to see their financial situation and start to create opportunities and create plans for themselves to create a surplus so that they can invest. If CVP is kind of sitting at the bottom of the funnel and creating those accessible opportunities to invest in high growth companies, a lot of my personal work is kind of filling the top of the funnel through educational programs, doing some work in Louisiana with a research grant around studying financial education for high school students. I've done a bunch of work, with the NFL and put together a program at Columbia Business School teaching athletes to invest in the building blocks of entrepreneurship. So for me, it's being someone that didn't come from this world, really didn't have access to this world until I got into the NFL. It's been very important for me to kind of keep that door open and share those insights and share those experiences with folks that come from similar situations as I do. Because again, like back to the top of this, it's making every right investor decision is not what makes you a great investor. It's pulling the trigger on high quality opportunities that have a high probability of success. That's how the real wealth is built. If we can create some of those opportunities and we can create access to some of those opportunities for folks that have been left out of the conversation for a while, then that's definitely part of our double win.
Yeah, it all comes back to risk return in terms of
absolutely.
Yeah. Marques, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Before we go, where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about your work at Champion Venture Partners?
Sure. You can check out our website at championventurepartners.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and then individually you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. My handle is just my name, Marques Colston.
Great. We'll include all that information in the resources section of the show notes. Thanks again, Marques, and thank you to everyone who tuned in to today's episode. Don't forget to follow the Agent of Wealth on the platform you listen from and leave us a review of the show. We're currently accepting new clients, and if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one consultation with our advisors, please do so at bautisfinancial.com/call.
Thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bautis Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional financial planning and investment advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investments and financial planning.